What fact is common knowledge in your field, but almost unknown to the rest of the population? Your calf muscles act as a pump for your lymph fluid, which is basically the garbage pickup and immunity DoorDash of your body. Without flexing your calf, the fluid has no way of moving against gravity. Each time we walk, the muscles contract, squeezing the fluid back up towards the core for processing. That's why sitting for long periods causes swelling in the legs. LPT, sitting for long periods? Move your ankles up and down to pump the calf at a, holy crap, this blew up. I'm overwhelmed by all the responses. Thank you for the awards. A few things to add. Source. I am a lymphedema specialist. Veins of the lower leg also heavily rely on the calf muscle pump, so blood pools along with lymph from prolonged immobility. Elevating your legs is helpful, using gravity to help move fluid. Also, using compression socks to help push the fluid back up, especially if you stand still for long periods. Our lymph nodes are located at joint spaces such as knees, hips, armpits, etc., so that movement compresses them and moves the fluid throughout the body. Movement is key. The thoracic duct in your upper abdomen processes about 70% of lymph. Deep breathing compresses the duct via the diaphragm and helps to move lymph. People who lack mobility, think paraplegics or people bedbound from illness, are prone to lower leg swelling and often have complications such as blood clots, DVTs, skin breakdown, wounds, etc., because all the garbage is just sitting in one spot. Manually moving the legs helps, or using specifically designed pumps. Told her, pump your calves, take deep breaths, and move your joints to improve everything. Story 2. Powerful explosives are so insensitive to shock that it usually takes a smaller, more sensitive explosive to set them off. C4 will just burn if put into a fire. Soldiers used it to cook food in Vietnam. Story 3. Generally speaking, if you add the percentage of the body covered in third-degree burns and the person's age together, you get the likelihood of it being a fatal burn, 32 and 40% burn coverage. About 70% of people in that condition will die. 200B. Source. Fiery. Working closely with several doctors from burns units. I love the 100-year-old people comments and the people with 0% burns but in thigh or 30s lamenting the 40% death chance. Story 4. Cement and concrete are not the same thing. Cement is the main ingredient in concrete, but concrete is the whole mixture of cement, sand, aggregate, water, etc. Story 5. Those high-end or expensive neighborhoods they slap up really fast usually. Gated communities and other semi-exclusive suburbs full of McMansions are built with the absolute cheapest materials and poorest quality untrained labor. Never buy a spec home without some serious research into what you're actually buying. All that luxury is barely surface deep. Story 6. The sensors in digital cameras, including phones, are monochromatic. They don't see color and have a tiny color filter on each sensor element so it can detect one of 3 colors: red, green, blue. Then the image is created by calculating what the other 2 colors might be based on one color value and the values of the nearest sensors around it. Talder. 23 of the color in a digital photo is calculated from the 13 that is actual data. Story 7. UTIs will often cause confusion in people over 70. ETA. UTI is urinary tract infection, and some people can get confused to the point of hallucinations and delirium. It can cause increased weakness, which also leads to falls. Second, according to this study, the confusion and delirium is brought on by the inflammation and immune response involved. Story 8. In archaeology, it's super awesome and great that you brought stuff to an archaeologist at a local dig site near you of things you found in your backyard or nearby, asking us appraise it. But the thing is, we're actually more interested in the context the item are found. We want to see the bigger picture. Arrowheads, flint knaps, trade beads, etc. are super cool, but they are worth so much more when we can tell if they are part of a hoard, burial site, ceremonial site, etc. Story 9. People almost always try to exit through the same door they entered. In a crowded venue, always take a second to find your exit, and then find a second exit. Mark them in your brain, just in case. In an emergency, most of the crowd is going to go for the main door they came in through. Knowing where another exit is can save your life. Story 10. In any given nature, do ejaculate or come. Seminentary, the protagonist animal you're rooting for, is played by several different actors. That is, that one brown bear's story is patched together from footage of a bunch of different bears. And in about 90% of the animal reacting shots, they're reacting to the camera crew. Nature do ejaculate or come. Seminentaries are heavily constructed. Story 11. When I worked as a barista, how much ducking syrup is in flavored drinks? At the cafe I worked at, we measured flavoring by grams. If you got a large mocha, that mother ducker would have like 110 grams of chocolate sauce in it. If you want a little bit of flavor, I suggest only 1 pump, 2 max. Story 12. Lab-grown diamonds cost $2 per cent of electricity to grow. The value price has absolutely plummeted on them the last 2 years, most especially the last 8 months. Don't overpay on them as they all perform. 1 CT is currently 6. 800. So for the first time in the history of the jewelry world, you can officially buy moissanites from high-end brands that are more expensive than their lab-grown diamonds of same quality. The amount of people robbed of value the last 2 years is in the millions in dollar amount unfathomable. Had a guy as recent as March spend $24,000 on a 3-seat lab grown online when I was finding them for $5,500 at the time. Places are rushing to make money back from buying in bulk. There will be a do ejaculate or cum seminentary about this someday. Story 13. Urban heat kills way more people in Australia than bushfires. In the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria, 173 people died in the fires, but over 300 died of the heat prior to that. Also, most of those deaths occur at night, not during the day. Story 14. In movies, they unnecessarily yank on horses' reins, practically ripping their mouths out. Anytime you see their mouths open with the bit pulled way back in there, they're not having fun. And it's for no reason other than maybe drama, and the trainers are crafty for letting that happen. Story 15. Volumetrically, most rocks are made of mostly oxygen. Most of the entire Earth, crust and mantle, is also nearly half oxygen by mass. If you've ever read Oxygen Discovered on Moon, it's rocks. It means they've discovered rocks. Story 16. Pain is effectively a psychological phenomenon and a terrible indicator of physical injury. Far too many people think the human body is a simple cause and effect model. It hurts, therefore, something where the pain is located must be wrong. Instead, it is much more like a set of wildly complex, interdependent systems like climate or stock markets. A lot of medical diagnosis is educated guessing with an over-reliance on singular labels for the benefit of explaining the situation to the patient. Story 17. Bed bugs don't make you a nasty person with a nasty home. An infestation isn't due to a sanitation issue. They're an imported pest, which means they hitched a ride on something you brought into the house, usually luggage or furniture. Story 18. Trucker here, and we don't want to be anywhere near you either. Go around or stay back. Don't just ride right beside us. We can't see you very well when you are beside us, and if crap happens, you're gonna go splat. It is very, very, very rare that any driver wants to slow you down. It's not like we get our rocks off on making you late. We work extremely long hours on very little sleep, and we just want to get where we're going without getting in an accident and killing someone. Trust me, if we could go faster, we damn sure would. Also, if you give us the fist pump to honk our horn, you just made our whole week. That's one of the greatest joys in a trucker's life. Be safe out there. A reoccurring comment is that most of you get it and are very cool, but you hate when a truck driver hops in the hammer lane when you're trying to pass them at a reasonable speed. I'm with you on that, and I'm here to tell you most truck drivers are not assholes like that, and the real truckers hate the ones that are. Every profession has a group of assholes that ruin it for the good ones. This has gotten an unexpectedly high response, and I really appreciate all of you joining in the conversation. If we would all just communicate like this more often, we could solve a lot of problems in this world. Story 19. When you're taking Imodium, you're actually taking an opioid. But it's designed to only interact with the opioid receptors in your digestive tract to slow down your intestines. Scientists were like, hey, you know that anti-diarrhea medication heroin? Well, what if we made a version of that without the pesky side effects of getting you high? Story 20. If a website is slow, there's a big change. It's not because the developers did a bad job, but because marketing insisted on putting dozens of trackers and ads on it. Story 21. I work in acrylic sheet. The number of people who do not understand what translucent means is astounding. Translucent =, transparent. Translucent is solid color that allows light transmission. It glows. Transparent is just that, transparent. We have customers call us all the time, telling us we filled an order wrong, that they received a solid color and ordered translucent red. Thanks for all the upvotes and thoughts. For clarification, majority of these customers order online either through our website or Etsy. Both sites have dozens of pictures and videos explaining and showing the differences. Story 22. Trees do not heal through regeneration like people think they do. They quite literally just grow over it. The tree can close the wound off in a way not really visible to us, but it will never grow back that same tissue in the same way like we would when we cut ourselves. It would be like growing a second layer of skin over a cut and never really healing the cut. Your body would make it stop bleeding, but you'd always be able to see your cut if you peel the layers of skin that grew over top. Trees are like onions, just like ogres. They have layers. I always think of a jawbreaker when I work with trees. Did anyone get my Shrek reference? I should go to bed now. Story 23. Genetics. There's a bunch of stuff we don't report back because they're considered incidental findings. This can include genetic diseases with no treatment, mitigation, or non-paternity. If your kid is sick with a genetic disease and you go get genetic testing done for mom, dad, and little Timmy, we do not automatically report back if dad is no relation or is actually an uncle. At the same time, in most places, you have the right to request your data. Story 24. A lot of people think that commercial aircraft fly themselves. In truth, all takeoffs are flown manually by the pilots, as are the vast majority of landings. The autopilot is advanced in a lot of aircraft, but it also screws up often and without warning. Story 25. The ER is there to keep you from having a catastrophic outcome in the next few hours, days, or next few minutes in some cases. If nothing irreversible is going to happen for several days, they don't really care what the problem is. Story 26. Being nice and patient will give you a bigger chance of getting a refund or a new of whatever is broken than being angry and blaming the random worker. Story 27. We have cameras that can see what is in your trash as we dump it. Some companies even take snapshots of every can's contents to catch hazmat items. They bill the city with the address it came from, and the city could follow up with the homeowner for reimbursement if they choose. How crappy in general. People are at making sure they are recycling the right items and properly cleaning some of their items before putting them in the recycling bin. We remember the houses with issues. People that try to double dump, overfill, and dump hazmat. We watch for those offenders specifically. We will pull out cans for handicapped people, dump them, and put them back. You have to call and have that set up, though. The garbage man knows what's going on in your neighborhood, almost as well as the mailman. Story 28. A traffic light changing colors at an intersection involves lots of math. The amount of time it stays as a yellow light followed by it turning red, at which point all directions will be red for a period of 3 seconds is all done by specific calculations. Everything is taken into consideration for it when all the lights are red for that brief second. How many meters feet is the intersection? What is the speed limit versus the actual traveling speed? Average amount of cars that pass that spot in an hour, following distance. The grade of the road. If it's on a 1% incline, it'll be different timing than if it were on a 2% incline. Story 29. The opposite sides of a die should always add up to 7. On a craps table, you'll see the stick dealer bring the dice to the middle of the table and separate them corner to corner. This is so the person sitting down, box supervisor, can verify with the mirror opposite of them that the opposite sides total 7. 25/16/34 source. 14 plus years of dealing table games. Apologies. I should have included sides of a 6-sided die. Story 30. Trains are so long, we don't know if we are still blocking the crossing you are waiting at. We have measuring devices, counter, that tell us how far the head end has traveled, but they may have worn out enough to give us a bad reading. We try to avoid blocking crossings way more than you will ever know. But if I'm squeezing between 2 crossings because the dispatcher put me there, and my counter is off by 30 feet every mile, 5,280 feet, and my train is 2 miles long, US max is 16,000 feet. I'm going to accidentally block your crossing. It's also hard to stop. I go past a red signal, I get fired. So if I'm squeezing up to a red signal to get my rear end off your crossing, I'm seriously risking my job for your inconvenience. I do it, but a little patience would be nice. And just because everyone always goes there, yes, I have been made late to work by being blocked by a train. I have even been late to work because I was blocked by my own train. That crew was working until I got there, and had to work an extra 20 minutes because they couldn't leave until I got there, and I couldn't get there until they left. Story 31. There's no difference between a dialect and a language. Not even intelligibility, though it can be useful to say so. Alternatively, languages are more accurately dialect continuums. We just arbitrarily chop up these continuums according to political or geographical nomenclature as languages. Zooming in further, speech is comprised of bundles of features, with perfectly matching bundles being rare between individuals. Idiolect equals sign the speech of an individual. Also, you typically only use between 20 to 80% of the salient features associated with your dialect, and you almost certainly have multiple dialects feature bundle configurations or multiple registers for use in different situations, and the ratio will be different in each. We prefer to learn language from our peers, not our parents, and there's very little they can do about it. We only have a brief window in which to learn language. People who fail to be primed with at least one language by a certain stage of brain development will never learn it fully. They will have problems acquiring syntax and derivational morphology. That is, language has a biological basis, but it needs input from our environment to take hold. This critical period depends on individual brain development, but usually begins to close near puberty. This is related to the ease with which children acquire second languages over fully developed adults, after which our second language learning has to be internalized, the same as any other area of study. No language is really harder to acquire than another. In second language acquisition, entry-level learning may be easier or harder depending on the similarities shared between the learner's first language and target language, but still nothing that can't be covered with a few extra months. The real learning process begins only once the learner has internalized all of that. Language is only spoken or signed, not written. Writing is an approximation of language. Even the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA, a tool linguists use for do ejaculate or come, Semanenting language is a necessarily imperfect approximation that records values in a broad rather than precise sense. It's just a little less arbitrary than socio-culturally evolved writing systems. Linguists study grammar. They don't prescribe or proscribe it. You only have to watch your speech around primary school teachers tasked with instructing arbitrary convention for a practical purpose. Linguists want you to stub your foot and give us your very best profanity and generally think as little as possible about what you're saying. Story 32. Breathing in mystery dust from drywall, insulation, carpentry, tile cutting, or any other dust-forming activity can cause lasting effects if breathed in for long periods of time. That in 95 is important. Story 33. If you're behind on rent, it's better to break the lease and move out than wait to be evicted. If you move out early, your account will be sent to collections. It can take anywhere from 120 days for a collection to appear on your CR, which gives you time to find a new home. It's highly unlikely that your collection will be reported to all 3 CR bureaus, so sometimes it will slip under the radar during CR checks. In addition, you can have the collection removed from your CR by paying off the balance, disputing the collection, or paying a CR repair specialist to remove it for you. And you can still qualify for a mortgage as long as your DTI ratio is in check. You have a lot of wiggle room and opportunity to save face with the collections. An eviction stays on your CR. Report for 7 years. It's reported to all 3 CR bureaus. Any respectable property owner property management company will not rent to someone with an eviction. Mortgage lenders will view you as irresponsible and unlikely to make on-time payments, and they will deny your application. There's no way to hide it or explain it or work it away. You can lose a few nights' rest over a collections or be haunted by an eviction for a decade. Your choice. Story 34. A drop of oil spilled into the water, navigable waterway to be exact, must be reported to the National Response Center. Failure to do so is a criminal violation. It's never prosecuted due to the resources it would take, but is factored when assessing a civil penalty. Story 35. It's getting more known now, but therapists and psychologists have their own therapist or psychologist. A therapist or psychologist is not immune to having poor mental health because, let's face it, life is hard and things happen. And many people in the field have a mental illness they've been successfully managing. Story 36. There's a condition called aphantasia, where some of the population lack the capacity to create mental imagery. For example, most people can close their eyes and create a mental image of an apple, loved one, a car, etc. But those with aphantasia can't. They also tend to not be able to create a mental image of something not within sight, but can experience dreams. Story 37. The point of most loyalty programs isn't to give you points so you'll shop more, though that isn't a bad thing. It's to gather data. That is, where do you shop, how often, how much do you buy there, what sort of things at what price points, etc., etc. For us marketing types, data is king, even small things like if a cashier asks for your zip code. Source. Marketing professor who still actually works in marketing. Story 38. Hotels have better water quality than anywhere else in a given town city because they have to filter the water to prevent Legionnaire's disease. I did have Act Design for a bit and watched a webinar on it. My company designed both the MS sets and sets for commercial buildings, so we also did the plumbing design. The filters are for water entering from the main preventing sediment from ejaculate or cum, semennulating in the pipes that allows Legionella to grow. This is also us specific, but wouldn't be surprised if it also applies to other advanced economies with decent regulations. Story 39. Bamboo is a grass, is 100% sustainable, and the plywood made from it is harder than oak, is naturally antimicrobial, is water resistant, stores carbon like a mother ducker, and has similar resistance to compression as concrete. Plus, pandas like it. To add about the pandas. Story 40. In pole dancing, the pole spins. Lots of people are very surprised when they learn this, as they think the dancers just spin like crazy on a static pole. You can make a static pole look like it's spinning, but it's much harder. And most of the time, if you see someone spinning on a pole, especially if it's fast, it's the pole that's spinning. But static also exists. Story 41. CPR rarely is successful with good clinical outcomes. Even worse with no-laid poor quality CPR. It's also insanely brutal. Broken ribs if done right. So if you make it, you're going to be in really bad shape, better than dead, if you're one of the very low % who survives. Story 42. Library employees face religious harassment and threats so frequently that specialized training for religious attacks is now provided. Oftentimes, we find religious groups stealing books and shoving them behind shelves, or just outright destroying them. Some of the most difficult months on library staff are Black History, Pride Month, and Hispanic Heritage. There is an uptick in violence against library staff during those months, one even involving the killing of a librarian while she was sitting in her car. Story 43. Diabetes is really a circulation disorder. Sure, it starts with a high blood sugar problem, and a very high blood sugar can kill you due to acid buildup, but that's usually rare. What's more common for poorly controlled diabetics is their vessels slowly calcify from that extra sugar and metabolic problems. It starts with the smallest vessels that's further away from the heart, toes, feet, legs, then it affects the kidneys, then the heart, and the brain. That's the main reason a lot of diabetics end up having their leg amputated from open sores that never heal and get infected, and then end up on dialysis with kidney failure. Then they die from heart attacks or strokes. Many of the poorly controlled diabetic patients I have die in 5 years. Story 44. Therapy isn't something that happens to you. Therapy is a tool that you can use, and you need actually apply the skills outside of the therapy space. Also, change is hard AF. People really underestimate how hard it is to be able to do the hard work necessary to change via therapy. Story 45. Karaoke shows average 12 songs an hour. All it takes is around 40 songs to make a 3-hour wait. In short, stop yelling at your karaoke person. Someone has to be last. Story 46. There's not one big, all-encompassing welding certification. There are many, many welding certs depending upon the material, aluminum, steel, etc., welding process, MIG, TIG, SMA, material thickness, material position, etc., etc., etc. I am certified in 6G mild steel schedule 80 open root pipe SMA. That's just one certification, one of the most difficult ones to attain. This doesn't necessarily mean I know how to weld on an aluminum boat or TIG stainless piping. Those are different welding processes. Story 47. Bacteria that can cause serious and deadly infections such as Clostridium difficile or Staphylococcus aureus can be part of your normal microbiota, like your nose, intestines, and skin. Also, your mouth and intestines contain many more microbes than any toilet, although most of them just coexist with you or even support your body. Your microbiome also influences your brain chemistry, so better be nice to your little friends and feed them some kimchi from time to time. Story 48. Audio engineer here. Autotune doesn't magically give you a master singing voice. There seems to be a stigma among the general population in regards to Autotune. People seem to think only terrible, untalented singers use it. This isn't true. A lot of great singers out there use it for pitch correction in post-production. Artists like Drake and Kanye use it as an effect in the same manner as phasers or flangers, because it's popular in their genres. Pop artists too, I guess. But indie, folk, country, even rock and metal singers would use it for simple pitch correction when they're just a little off-key, and they don't feel like wearing their vocals out trying to get it perfect. It doesn't mean they're untalented. They still have to have a good voice and be able to sing. Story 49. That the quickest way to get kids to stop wanting to read for literally the rest of their lives is to limit what they're allowed to read. Reading comic books and graphic ones like Dog Man, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and the Dork Diaries count as reading at that age just as much as classics do. Story 50. Anesthesiologist, lots. 1. Cigarette smoking, even if you lie about it all, PTS lie about something, becomes evident to us immediately. It's really bad, friends. Please stop. 2. It's very hard to kill someone. God made us hardier than you know. 3. Please don't eat after midnight and lie about it. Aspiration pneumonitis is vicious. 4. People, especially teenagers, worry about spilling secrets under anesthesia. There's no such thing as truth serum. In my 30-plus years in anesthesia, not a single PT has spilled any secrets. You just go to sleep. Story 51. There has never been a confirmed case of an art heist commissioned for a private collection. Heist movies like the Thomas Crown affair just don't happen. There's no money in stolen artwork because provenance is tracked very closely, so you can never tell anyone you have a stolen painting. Art forgery, on the other hand. Story 52. Children are not trying to make you angry. They are trying to communicate with the tools they have, and that can be frustrating because they're 3 and don't have a big grown-up toolbox yet. Story 53. If you order a well-done steak, you are getting the steak that is the oldest and closest to going out of date. We might not understand your tastes, but you let us use up stock would otherwise be thrown tomorrow. So we don't mind you in the slightest until you ask why the well-done steak is taking so long to cook. Then we are annoyed. Story 54. A lot of people seem to think the weigh stations on the side of the highway will compare a truck's load to the weight that same truck had at the last weigh station, seemingly to catch smuggling or theft that has happened in the meantime. This isn't true. There's simply a weight limit for these vehicles, and it's checking for that. Story 55. The self doesn't exist in our brains unless you think of yourself, meaning that when you are focused on anything else, or asleep, there is nowhere in your brain that the self resides. As such, our brains are constantly creating a sense of individuality and separation from everything else in the universe when we think of ourselves. This is essential for our survival. This creates certain problems like people believing that their inner monologue is who they are and will do all kinds of things to appease the little tyrant that is their ego. The moment you realize that you are not your thoughts, it becomes much easier to live the way you want to live. It's theorized that psychedelics are helpful in making this happen as they temporarily take your default mode network, the part of your brain that houses your ego, offline, allowing you to see the truth, which is that you aren't in the universe. Rather, you are a conscious part of the universe experiencing itself. Story 56? Used to be a department manager at Costco, managing the sample stations. There is absolutely no limit to the amount of samples you can take. None. If a worker cuts you off, they're going against standard and procedure. It's one of the first things we train our demo workers on. You can most definitely stand there for 3 hours eating the same sample if you want. No Costco worker can stop you. The reason behind it is because then you're given that huge opportunity to go Mr. Salesman on them. My mom used to be one of my workers and she took advantage of it. Ended up selling an untight pallet, about 500 units of mushroom crisps, to a restaurant owner. Story 57? In ancient times, in the Middle Ages, people did not necessarily all die around 30 years of age. The reason we say that is because there was much more child mortality, and thus that would offset the average age of death. Story 58. If your baby toddler has chronic or recurrent ear infections, it's important that you literally get in their face when talking to them, or at least make sure they're looking at you when you speak. In addition to raising the volume of your voice and exaggerating your words, let them see and feel, through airflow and vibrations, how words are produced. This may prevent the need for speech therapy and/or intervention for auditory processing problems later on. Story 59. When culturing bacteria, don't go past a passage of 3 because you can cause a phenotypic change and cause a new strain to come about. Background: microbiologist in a QC lab working with BSL 1 and 2. Story 60. There is no glam working in entertainment. It is a painful industry at all levels, both behind the scenes and what the public sees. Also painful and stressful. Story 61. Historian here. Everything you read, regardless of source, has the biases of whoever wrote it woven throughout. I will tell a much different account of a Roman battle if I am a Roman citizen than if I am a Gaul. Same goes for modern times. I will tell a much different account of an event as a liberal woman than if I was a conservative man. That's why checking and vetting sources is our biggest advice. Remember the context that the author is writing from when you're reading. Story 62. The amount of oily-ass garbage we dumped in the ocean from our aircraft carrier was astronomical. I can't believe everyone just sort of turned their back on it all. The first time I saw it happen, I was like, am I going to get in trouble for this? And was told to SEFU and do what I was told. Yeah, I almost got in trouble for not polluting the ocean with some gnarly chemicals, grease, and hydraulic fluids. Story 63. They actually teach in official, written and published by Cambridge books that ending sentences with a preposition is okay. So if you're being a grammar dickhead about that, it's time to drop it. Story 64. I was a professional chef for 12 years and now work in food market research. The reason why many prefer food that is processed, ready-made, or from restaurants is salt. We use way more salt than most home cooks would imagine. We also salt everything: the lettuce, the tomato, the quejaculate or cum, Semmenbur, the dressing, the carrots. Everything in your salad was salted till tasted good. In fact, nothing else you do to food really matters. It's all a matter of salt, acidity, sweetness, and texture in some varying percentage each. My company has consistent sensory data since 1956 on this, and our clients are some of the biggest food producers: Frito-Lay, Pepsi, Conagra, General Mills, Tyson, Goya, Cargill, Mondelez, etc. We know exactly how to make a potato chip pleasing to 99% of human consumers. I'm not even joking. It is 99% of consumers. Story 65. Casino dealers do have some control whether you win or lose. We can't control the cards or the numbers, but we can control things like speed, entertainment, and the amount of high-value cash chips we give you. Slowing down the game is your best bet. Busy tables and complicated bets are your friend. Story 66. There's a veteran's long-term care benefit called aid and attendance. I have never met a veteran yet who knew about it. There is an asset threshold, and only wartime vets qualify. If your parents were Vietnam vets and need daily care, look it up. It's a life-changing benefit. Not just Vietnam vets. Korea too. Gulf War veterans need Congress to decide the years of qualifying service. Call your representative. Story 67. New neurons are formed in the adult brain as well. In the 12th grade, it's taught that neurons are terminally differentiated cells, and no new neurons are formed after birth. But in 1965, it was found that neurogenesis takes place in the adult brain. It's especially high in 2 regions: the hippocampus, memory formation, and lateral ventricles. In fact, after any injury to the brain, e.g. or stroke, the rate of neurogenesis increase to compensate for the loss of neurons. The rate of neurogenesis increases in pregnant females as well. This is directly related to the increase in their olfactory sensitivity. Now, scientists are studying how to trigger neurogenesis in such a way that A, it doesn't cause cancer, B, it can reverse neuron degeneration and prevent cure disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease, Story 68, hospitals. Inpatient healthcare is not what it used to be. You must be your own advocate. Ask questions. If something doesn't seem right, it probably shouldn't be happening. Insist on an in-person physician update with a plan every day. Make sure you understand it. Have a goal to work toward. There are not enough bedside healthcare workers to make the system function as it's designed. It's up to you to get yourself through it. Story 69. It's cheaper to film in for real. The only time we use CG or green screen are for the elements we can't do in reality. So a lot of what you see is real, just enhanced. Story 70. If you open your eyes and actually read the ducking error message, it'll often explain exactly what's gone wrong and sometimes how to fix it. At absolute minimum, it should contain a code that you can Google search in 30 seconds, and even you should be able to fix the issue in less time than it takes me to come to your desk. Darla. Story 71. Nothing is secure. Military-grade encryption means nothing. The web is held together with duct tape and rubber bands. Code isn't green text on a black background, except when it is. Software developer equals sign tech support expert. Printers are black magic, which cannot be made to work. If you have an Android phone and you refuse to get a Google Apple voice assistant, for example, Google Home Hub, on privacy grounds, you need to rethink how you're able to speak into your phone and have other people hear you. Story 72. You can't produce cold. It doesn't exist in physics. The world works in degrees Kelvin, which means that there is either no heat at all or some varying amount of heat. Therefore, displacement of heat is the only possible way to cool down a space. Story 73. Here's a fun one. When a radio host says something like, "We're giving Bruce Springsteen tickets to caller number 100, they aren't actually counting. They have no way of knowing. They just duck with people for a while and have fun, telling everyone who calls so close, "You're caller 99, until they need to go back on the air. Story 74. Smoke detectors don't tend to wake up children in the event of a fire. What was found to wake up a child best is a recording of the mom calling the child's name and telling them to wake up that there is a fire. But no smoke detectors have been designed to do that. So the standard, loud, annoying ones continue and children don't hear them. Story 75. Local TV reporters and anchors in small towns make a barely livable wage. Mine was $18,500 to start in 2007 and are extremely overworked. It is anything but a glamorous job. Story 76. How Excel is fundamental for the world economy. You can't imagine how many companies and even public administrations depends on some Excel files to run.